And now I maybe should continue towards the main points which we discussed as well, and it's the Victims' Rights Directive and the review of the GDPR. Today we adopted the first ever EU Victims' Rights Directive. And we did this because we have a serious issue in the EU. Around 15 million people were victims of serious offences in 2017. Also, the scale of gender-based violence in the EU is alarming. 1 in 3 women has experienced physical and/or sexual violence since she was 15 years old. Only about a third of women who are physically or sexually abused, mostly by their partners or close relatives, contact the authorities. The lockdown of society during the COVID-19 pandemic saw a rise in domestic violence, child sexual abuse and cybercrime, as well as racist and xenophobic hate crime. The strategy adopted today sets a number of actions for the next 5 years, focusing on 2 goals. One is empowering victims of crime and working together for victims of crimes. We have a robust legislation on victims' rights in the EU, especially protecting the most vulnerable children, the elderly, victims of racist or homophobic hate crime, or victims with disabilities. Under EU rules, all victims must be treated in a respectful, tailored, professional and non-discriminatory manner. But we saw that uptake in the member states is still not there. I have heard too many stories of victims being afraid to report the crime, of stigmatization of victims, lack of awareness and support about their rights. And I'm sure Didier will explain to you this strategy in more detail, but for me, one thing is very clear: we have to stop being indifferent. Our government and authorities level, it's long overdue to implement the legislation and support structures. We have infringements against 21 member states running, and this is really not acceptable. In this strategy, we also look ahead to develop acquis further, especially in area of gender violence and with regard of most vulnerable victims. This is about people. This is about the people who fall victim of crimes, of harassment, of racial hatred. They cannot feel this accepted by us, by the majority. We should become more thoughtful, react and support. Only then the real change can happen. And the last topic I want to cover now is the GDPR review. As you know, we have an obligation to do this review after 2 years of functioning of GDPR. We promised that we will come with objective assessment, so here it is. In general, I can say that we see GDPR as a success story. Europe's data protection regime has become a compass to guide us through the digital transition as an important pillar on which we are building other policies, such as data strategy or our approach to artificial intelligence. Also in COVID time, we witnessed how important it was that we had GDPR when we were assessing the privacy aspects in regard to the tracing apps and the tools which were to help in the COVID crisis. Even though only 2 years passed, we have come a long way. I remember about 3 years ago, there was literary panic about the GDPR and that it will be end of the world, and we had to face a lot of campaigning also against GDPR as something which will be burdensome, which will stop the innovations and many other things. I have a good news today. No doomsday was here. It didn't happen. On the contrary, GDPR has become a good example. We can give people more control over their data in the increasingly digital economy. It provides a good balance between the fundamental right of privacy and technological innovation, or also between privacy and security interests. The GDPR provides individuals with enforceable rights, such as the right of access, rectification, erasure, the right to object, portability, and enhanced transparency. Good news is that the people know about it. Around 70% of Europeans heard of the GDPR and they started using their rights. Of course, it is also present in our assessment that there should be more awareness, because without each individual, without each person who takes care about his or her own privacy, the legislation cannot do the miracle. So more awareness and more information is needed. We also observed that our approach to the GDPR was the right one. It created the more harmonized rules across the single market, and more companies are using GDPR concepts such as privacy by design and by default as a competitive differentiator. And I can say that the philosophy of one continent, one law is very advantageous for European small and medium enterprises who want to operate on the European single market. I think in general the GDPR has become a truly European trademark. It puts people and their rights at the center. It does not leave everything to the market like in the US, and it does not see data as a means for state supervision as in China. Our truly European approach to data is the first answer to difficult questions we face as a society. It served as inspiration to build a European approach to a human-centric AI, artificial intelligence. It makes us pause before facial recognition technology, for instance, will be fully developed or implemented. And I dare to say that it makes Europe fit for the digital age. On the international side, the GDPR has become a reference point with a truly global convergence movement. In this context, we are happy to support trade and safe digital data flows and work against digital protectionism. And yes, these were the positive things, but of course the assessment also includes a very serious to-do list for the Commission, for the Member States, for the data protection authorities. You will hear more about it from Didier. We have to speak about the capacities of the data protection authorities. We saw the increase of the capacities at the level of the data protection authorities. We saw 42% increase in staff and 49% in budget for all national data protection authorities taken together in the EU between 2016 and 2019. The European Data Protection Board and the data protection authorities have to step up their work to create a truly common European culture, providing more coherent and more practical guidance, and work on vigorous but uniform enforcement. We have to work together with the board and the member states to address concerns, in particular those of the small and medium enterprises. But we should be proud of this modern and horizontal piece of legislation and continue working on its success. For this, we have to ensure that we fully reap its benefits and mitigate all the risks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Monsieur Renner.